following announcement has been paid for by the Celtic World Order.
Hello there and welcome back to Celtic World Order. As always, I'm Steve O'Matt. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you back to the channel here for another brand new wee video as we look at Celtic's midfield and we look at perhaps a very welcome selection headache that our manager finds himself with. Many players to select from, all top talents. Of course, it's going to be all change because one of the guys who would have been first on the team sheet in the way of Matt O'Reilly has since departed to pastures new at Brighton. Fortunately for him, that didn't start off too well, but that's not a Celtic issue anymore. And we've got our own top quality players in situ, and we've got big decisions to make because in terms of that central midfield trio, who's going to be the ones that are going to be playing most regularly and who's most likely to miss out. And I've got a few thoughts on that and I will share them with you. But before I do, I just want to say welcome back to the channel. If you're a returning viewer or subscriber, then thank you as ever for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, then it's a warm welcome to you as well. But before you leave, before you stop watching this video, make sure that you hit that subscribe and bell icon. That way, every time we do one of these uploads or where we go live, you'll get notified and you'll never, ever miss any of the CW content here. If you want to reach out with us elsewhere, you can get us on X. You'll find us at CWPod1888 and you'll get more Celtic updates and chatter on there as well to get plenty of Celtic content from Celtic World Order in your life. But anyway, as I said, Celtic's midfield, the manager finds himself with perhaps a very welcome headache, if you want to call it that, because there's a plethora now of actually good depth and quality when it comes to that central three in midfield. Of course, we'd been used to last season of it being something of a mix of either Bernardo, McGregor, Hatate, or the outgoing Matt O'Reilly. But now with him out the picture, we have brought in some reinforcements in the form of homegrown and great talent, actually. Former Dundee captain Luke McCowan and also top Celtic man. He's one of our own and that's only going to help us, I'm pretty sure. But also we have smashed our club transfer record, bringing in Erne Engels for the tune of 11 million from Augsburg. An absolute fantastic young talent, which if you look at everything that's been said and written about him, it seems as if the sky is the limit. And certainly price doesn't always guarantee quality, but if Celtic are paying that kind of money and he's been identified by the manager, well, you've got to hope and expect he's going to live up to the bill. But of course, someone like that coming in is going to beg a question, because usually when a manager brings in one of their own identified targets, sometimes that edges someone out of the picture, does it not? And of course, let's not forget that Bernardo is also a player that Brendan Rodgers brought in last season, was very keen. It was a bit protracted to get him back in the door, but he pursued it. It was someone that he wanted. And again, that's a Brendan Rodgers guy. So we've got two midfielders that have been self-penned or by design of the manager, and he's brought them in. So that begs the question, what does that mean for the other midfielders in the picture? Now, I'm not talking about Cal McGregor. He's the franchise. He's the midfield linchpin. He is Mr. Celtic, and he is indispensable. You just do not get rid of Cal McGregor. So we are talking more along the lines of, well, where does that leave Rio Hatate? And I've got a couple of thoughts on this. Of course, let me just caveat this. It is all just speculation. It's all just personal opinion. It's not gospel. So if you disagree with me, that is perfectly fine. Let me know your comments below. And you know what? If you watch this channel, then you know what I think of Rio Hatate. I am always singing his praises, as is my right-hand man, Paddy. In fact, Rio might just be Paddy's favourite player at Celtic at this moment in time. So by the end of this video, I wouldn't be surprised if the phone starts ringing and I've got Paddy giving me dog's abuse and telling me that I know absolutely nothing. But as I say, it's all just opinion. So let me know what you think. So anyway, as I said, manager brings in two midfielders that he really wants, and combined to the tune of almost £15 million. Bernardo, of course, a wee bit more bargain basement. He was wanted for about £6 million, and Celtic, with decent business, albeit very protracted business, managed to negotiate that down to just under £4 million. Of course, Erne Engels was one that we really had to battle and show the colour of our money, and eventually that was £11 million, with it supposedly going to be rising up to about 13 million when you take in the add-ons and all that extra kind of jazz that they do in these transfer arrangements now. But as I say, that just means, how are we going to move forward? Well, if we look at Celtic in a whole so far, from the sort of after January last season through into the pre-season and where we've found ourselves now after a couple of games in the league, we have been very strong in the attack. The style is somewhat, I say stayed the same, but a slight evolution. There's a lot more purpose. We're quicker, we're sharper. The movement is more direct, less laboured, instead of that shoehorning about and maybe taking, 6-7 passes to get there. We're getting ourselves in breaking lines quicker. We're doing it with, 2, maybe 3, maximum 4, but also more importantly, we're getting a lot more purchase down the wings. That was an area in our midfield where we were really sorely lacking. A lot of things were going through the centre. Yes, with Palma, we sort of had decent numbers, assists and goals, but it did quickly dwindle away. And in terms of guys like Kuhn and Yang, we weren't really getting much output from them. And it wasn't until this season, in the pre-season, that not Yang, because Yang still got a lot of questions to answer, but Nicholas Kuhn has really started to show the form that we have been requiring. Obviously, at the tail end of last season, we had a resurgence of James Forrest, and he was creating that spark down the left-hand side. And obviously Maeda, he does Maeda things, but it's very positive at these early stages of this new season that we've got Forrest absolutely on it when he comes on. He can, of course, play left and right, gives us great versatility. He's been chipping in with goals, he's been chipping in with assists. We've obviously got Maeda, who looks like a completely rejuvenated player. I don't know whatever Celtic have been putting in his juice, but it seems to have not only just kept up his energy levels, but I dare I say it, it looks like a guy reborn. All the things that I used to criticise him about seem to just be clicking into place. The touch, the delivery, and of course, adding goals into his game. So we've got more threat down there on the left-hand side. And as I say, over on the right, yes, Nicholas Kuhn is carrying it all on his own back, but he's doing a fantastic job. And so far this season, he has scored a good few goals and, of course, many assists. So that's something when it comes to our midfield areas, that's something that we have been sorely lacking. And a return to that and getting more goals from down the wings might just alter how we make our decisions when it comes to the central three. And that's why looking at Rio Hatate, he's going to be the main guy that I'm looking at and thinking, what does that mean for Rio Hatate? Not necessarily in every game, but I think moving forward, and again, this is just my opinion, that Rio Hatate might be the guy that in certain games, particularly in Europe, might be the guy who just misses out, and I'll explain why. So anyway, let's have a little look back at Rio Hatate in general. As we know, last season he was very much hindered, unfortunately, with injuries, and I think maybe for ourselves that wasn't good at the time, but in the fullness of time and getting into this new season, it probably actually worked out quite well for us, because obviously we lost Matt O'Reilly because of such great performances, and if Hatate had kicked on from previous seasons, there's no doubt in my mind that those alleged interests in him would have been very much solid, and we could have found ourselves in a world of hurt if we lost potentially both Hatate and O'Reilly at the same time. So thankfully for us, we managed to get through without him. We would have obviously liked him for a lot of games, but we get through without him. He came back and he slowly worked his way in, but we're probably going to get at least this full season out of him, which is also very good. Sometimes these things do work in your favour, and I do think that if he was firing all cylinders in a great season, as I said, we might have lost 2 key players, and that could have been disastrous. Thankfully, we do have him, but last season, limited to only 7 starts in the league due to injuries, and overall, he was 21 appearances in total, playing 1,288 minutes, which, if you break it down into 90-minute games, is about 14 and a half games, which, as you can imagine, that's not a lot at all, and that just shows you how much of a troubled season he had, which was very unfortunate for him. If we look at the profile of Rio Hatate and we look at the outgoing Matt O'Reilly, of course, Matt O'Reilly was an absolute powerhouse and set him up to the mark last season. Great returns on goals, amazing amounts of assists, and some really, really top performances. He was something of a great creative spark in there. That was obviously supplemented with McGregor being the linchpin, being the guy who sat a wee bit deeper and orchestrated everything from behind. It gave O'Reilly that wee bit more freedom, as well as I said, we'd have guys dropping in and out the midfield, where that was Bernardo, where it was at times it was Home. We tried out that a couple of times. So there was a wee bit of mixing and matching there, but largely we were quite dependent on Matt O'Reilly. Now, whenever we went in that pre-season there and we still had O'Reilly, McGregor and Hatate, we thought we saw a wee bit of an evolution in Rio Hatate. The big things that I've criticised him, and certainly not just me, but if you remember back, Brendan Rodgers was quite critical. Maybe not critical is the word, but he was very honest in his assessment of Rio Hatate, and he said there was many things that, for as great a talent as he was, that he had to really work on. Work rate was one of them, ball retention was one of them, and also his general all-round play in terms of the passes. Now, the way I would always describe Rio Hatate is that he is a explosive and energetic player, but he's very much high risk for high reward. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you watch him, as I say, ball retention and losing of possession, he is quite culpable of it. And that's because he will always try that kind of risky pass that maybe another guy wouldn't try. Sometimes it comes off and it's, wow, it just blows your mind. But at the same time, it can lead to just loss of possession very, very easily. And particularly when I look at Europe, and you look at these sort of European teams, that's something that we really need to knuckle down on. We can't afford to be doing that. Now, if you remember in Europe, when we look at last season, Paulo Bernardo played in all the Champions League games. Now, why did he play in all those Champions League games? Well, I would imagine it's because, in my opinion, and I'm sure, general assessment of it, he fits that very, how would we say, European type of player. He's very good. He's very comfortable on the ball. He's comfortable at taking in under pressure. Very good, as I say, ball retention. Very little is he wasteful with the ball. It's not often that he is wasteful with the ball, but he also has other attributes where he's got a great eye for a pass. Maybe not the risky passes or the sort of Ferrari passes that you would get out of Hatate, but very intelligent football in mind and very safe but clinical passes where it needs to be. And of course, as we've seen before, he's got good ability, that low centre of gravity. He's good at carrying the ball and he's good at dribbling with the ball comfortably, which perhaps maybe Hatate doesn't have. He's more of a burst guy, and if he gets past you and it's usually to try and get a shot off, that's his style, but it's less of a sort of more cultured foot, if you will, that maybe a Bernardo has. And that's something to bear in mind when we look at what I'm going to be talking about for the European games in particular. That just makes me think, what are we going to be getting out there? Because Cal McGregor is the all-round consummate professional. He is very talented, and to put it lightly, if there's something that Cal McGregor can't do, then it's probably not worth doing in the first place. Great eye for a pass, hard in the tackle, great positional and tactical awareness. He knows where to be. He's always looking for the ball. He's always scanning, making those key passes, making runs, and of course, adding goals and having a goal threat in him as well. He's been playing slightly deeper, not a full deep line number 6, but he has been sitting a wee bit more in, and he's been letting things happen around him. Now that Matt O'Reilly's out the picture, obviously we'll have a wee chat about Erne Engels. That's someone who's going to be coming in who isn't like for like with O'Reilly. However, he is very close. He's closer to O'Reilly than Bernardo is, certainly closer to him than Rio Hatate is, and he's definitely more closer than Luke McCowan is. So again, it's all about finding that dynamic and how each player in the mid three relate to each other. So if we look back at last season, and I've just I say last season, looking at the four players sort of in question, I'm excluding Luke McCowan from this, not because I don't think he's good enough, just because I'm looking at more upon being for the European games. This is the whole purpose of this video predominantly, is looking at European games or looking at games that are more cagey, if you will. So if we look at it, I went and says between 23 to 20, 23, 24, up to current day, in terms of just basic numbers, basic numbers. We're not going to kill it with stats, just basic numbers, goals and assists, contributions. So for that period, despite his low output of games, up till currently, we have 5 goals and 4 assists for Rio Hatai. Now, of course, this season so far, we know that he's had 5 appearances, chipped in with 2 goals, which means there's been the 3 goals laying over from last season. He started his season bright so far in the league and hopefully kicks on for that. Now, if we look at Erne Engels, it's obviously a very smaller sample size because he's a guy that's kind of really just broke in. Last season was his first real proper season in the team at Augsburg and playing. Now, an interesting thing about him as well to bear in mind is that playing at Augsburg, his role would be defined completely different to where he'll find himself being at Celtic. Augsburg are not a team who are going to have a wealth of possession that are all going to be top of teams that they're playing against. It's very much going to be about sort of damage control and doing what he has to do, work rate over anything else really in his role at Augsburg. However, not too bad in terms of his output. 2 goals, which, isn't fantastic, but this is bear in mind the type of team that Augsburg are, but 4 assists, as I say, for him. His role was more about, similar to what we get with Cal McGregor, it was more about just orchestrating. Now, of course, Cal McGregor adds goals and he's got all that creative side on himself, but in general, he's the man that he's the metronome, he makes things tick, and that's very much what Erne Engels was doing. He was the steady hand, he was captain in the centre of the pitch, and just getting it to those key guys on the park elsewhere to do those things. Role could be completely differently defined now that he's at Celtic. He's going to be in a side that are going to have the lion's share of the possession. We're certainly going to be a far more attack-minded team, and we're going to be opening up more chances, not just for him, but for his colleagues around him. If we look at Paulo Bernardo, for example, over that same period, very good numbers as well, 4 goals and 3 assists, and we've seen those goals against Rangers at Celtic Park, and obviously contributions, telling, carrying the ball, as I say, shrugging off, being hard to be dispossessed. In the cup final, for example, gets the shot off and Ida comes through with it. So again, a very rounded and solid player. Maybe a guy who people will maybe dismiss and say, well, Bernardo's going to be the guy that's going to get put in the bin out of the midfield 3. But think of this as well, as I say, the manager's brought him back. Now, I know that sometimes you'll say, well, that goes for nothing, Steve-O. He's brought him back because he wants quality and he wants depth, but we worked so hard to get him in. He clearly is someone he wants to be playing. Now, I know you can't keep everyone happy, of course you can't, but I think we're going to have to see some clever rotation in this squad, and I just get the feeling, as I say, that it's going to be, that rotation is going to be between Hatate and it's going to be between Bernardo. That's my thoughts going forward, but as I say, I think it will be very much horses for courses. I think that Hatate is going to be the guy that if we're playing against a team where we know is going to be, we're expecting to maybe just blitz them, that he's more likely to start. And then if not, he's maybe going to be a guy that's coming on for impact, if we're maybe chasing the game, or we're behind, or we're just drawing even, and we're just running out of ideas, bring somebody on for that wee bit different. That's my gut feeling of what I think we're going to be getting for it. Now, that might not sound appealing to people out there, and I might say, well, why would you keep a guy with the talents of Hatate on the bench? But as I say, it's all about rotation. It's all about playing the team that's put in front of you, and that needs different tools for different times. In terms of Cal McGregor, look, I don't need to go into too much detail with McGregor. He is the franchise player, as I say. He is above them all. He is the guy that's just, light years ahead at this moment in time. And over that same period, 5 goals for McGregor and 6 assists. Now, he started this season on fire with those goals. Hopefully that's something moving forward. And again, as I talk about why I think we might drop in certain players for certain games, we're talking about attacking. We're talking about the threat. Now, you would maybe say, well, Hatate is going to offer you the most threat out of all these guys. However, bear in mind, as I say, we've now got Cal McGregor chipping in with those goals. We've got an Erne Engels who, in profile, is more closer to an O'Reilly. Now, I'm not saying he's going to give you the same numbers, so that's no guarantees in anything. But in terms of that, he is expected to be a lot closer to what O'Reilly was offering. And of course, as I say, he's playing a different system, playing a more attack-minded Celtic side. That's something that might be given consideration where you will get more out of him. Hatate that expectancy, that requirement for what he would do is maybe negated slightly because we're getting more across the board in terms of our wing play. Now, we weren't getting a lot of output or as much as we have been seeing lately last season. So the fact that we're getting goals from Maeda, we're getting goals from Forrest, we're getting goals from Kuhn, we're getting the assists as well. The attacks and the attacking threat is much wider, whereas at times it felt as if it was quite narrow. And guys like Rio Hatate were a necessity; they had to be in there when they were available because they offered it and others didn't. What I'm saying is we've got more of a spread now, so that might alter the manager's thinking as well. So if we look at that, I've got these things. I don't want to kill it with stats because on CW that's not a thing we've done, but I brought up this little graph here, and this is basically based on attributes, and it's over roughly about a 18-month period. Now, the reason that's such a small sample size is because we've got to account for guys like Erne Engels and Bernardo, who in the grand scale of things, by comparison to Rio and Cal McGregor, they're not going to have as much far back sort of attributes. It's attributes. So think it as being just an average of how they've performed in these different areas, and the areas are attacking, creativity, defending, tactical awareness, and technicality, like technical ability, what they do. As I say, it's a very generalized sort of grab here, but it just gives you a wee sort of rough show. Now, if you look at these here, as I say, what I find quite interesting, if you will, is if you look at Hatate, undoubtedly the key point there for him, as I said, is that creativity area. But if you look around there and you look at Erne Engels, is 64, so in terms of if you're going to be switching between guys or depending on guys, Erne Engels, and I keep saying this, coming in at £11 million. Now, of course, fee does not guarantee you a place. However, I just don't see Brendan Rodgers bringing in a guy at £11 million and having him sitting on the bench. I just don't see it. Now, he might, for these next couple of games, he'll be bled into the team. He needs to find his feet. Of course, he's not just going to get thrown into the deep end. However, I don't think that sort of bleeding in period will be too laboured and too dragged out. I think I would expect Erne Engels to be finding his feet within the next sort of 3 weeks or so. Certainly looking into the European games, I would expect him to feature. Would he start against Bratislava when that comes round? I don't know so much, but I would expect him to be playing, and if not, in situ for the second game. In terms of Cal McGregor, just looking at his numbers there, he is very much consistent across the board and scoring fairly well off them all. Rio Hatate, as you can see, the defending, the tactical, those are the bits that he's always sort of lost out on for me. As I say, is high risk, high reward, and that's the things that the manager levied at him is needing work on. Work rate, ball retention, losing the ball quite a lot. Now, if you look at Paulo Bernardo, yes, his numbers don't exactly blow you away, but he's very consistent across the board. He's very much what I would call a steady Eddie. He's one of these guys who, as I say, isn't going to blow your mind. You're never going to look at him and go, wow, what, that guy's phenomenal. Yes, we've seen some brilliant performances. He was amazing against Rangers in the first derby. He was fantastic there. We saw glimpses of that last season as well. And in this season alone, the games that he has started, he has looked very, very good. And certainly, again, a level up from the sort of flashes that we saw from last season. So bear in mind, that's a wee snapshot. There's great potential for that only to get better. Of course, there's potential for that to get better with Hatate, Erne Engels, McGregor. It is, they can all get better, but just looking at that small sample, I think that Bernardo is a steady Eddie. He's very dependable. He's going to be one of these guys that, similar to when we look back in the past, you'd have guys like Neil Lennon, for example, or you'd have even like a Paul Lambert, where they just do what is required of them and they do it extremely well without any fuss or fanfare. Yes, they'll have their moments where they'll score an absolute smasher, a goal, or they'll play an absolute blinding pass, but they'll maybe be the underappreciated player in the side that you do need. That's something, it's not always about massive amounts of attack and give me the ball and, constantly being in your face. Sometimes the guys that just tick away and do the basics but do it extremely well, that is just as important, particularly in Europe, than any guy that's going to shrug somebody off and smash one in from, 30 yards. Yeah, that looks great. But you need to think it. And I think that's what I'm talking about looking at Europe. I just think when we think last year, the fact that the manager played him in all those European games, I think that is where we're going to be looking at it. And the reason I think that perhaps that Hatate might be the guy in these sort of high tariff games that might miss out in the starting is when we're looking to be something where we says a wee bit more pragmatic. Now, folk don't like pragmatic. They think pragmatic is boring. They think pragmatic is too cautious, and it's not. I'm talking, we need to play our game. We don't want to drift too far away from what we've been doing, what we've been getting purchased from. And as I said previously on here, I think that when we play against these European teams that, generally speaking, play a high attacking line, that's where we can get purchased and we can get in behind. If we can bring the form that we've shown pre-season and the start of this season into Europe, that we can get real success there. However, when you are playing against the more tougher sides in this group, and I'm talking about, Dortmund away, Atalanta away, and I know it's the last game of the group, and that could be, a different sort of ball game altogether. Both teams could find themselves where it's something of a damp squib. But you're Aston Villa away, when you're playing against that extra level of calibre, particularly away, as we've seen previously, the kind of just going gung-ho and all out doesn't quite work. You need that pragmatism. You need to have that level of sort of calm heads. And for me, if I was going into a game, it would be Erne Engels. Again, this is just based on what we are told of him and what I've saw of him, and certainly the profile of him. But the main thing that his strengths have been identified is his concentration levels are very high. His positional awareness is supposedly very, very good. He has a great range of passing and also good set piece delivery. Tick, 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 tick. As I say, looking at Bernardo, the steady Eddie, that very European style of player, comfortable with the ball at his feet, can make the passes, but also, as we've seen, can muck in as well. Cal McGregor needs absolutely no introduction. I don't need to tell you what Cal McGregor could do. And I just think that looking at certain European games, or particularly certain games in the league, again, playing the stadium, playing the fixture, that what Brendan Rodgers might want to move forward or look at is a more quote-unquote European style. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, less sort of hustle and bustle, less all-out attacking. As I say, that's one thing I do love about Hatate. I know it sounds like I'm saying, well, if you love it, Steve, why are you saying you think he'll miss out? I do love the energy, I love the enthusiasm, but as I say, sometimes, just sometimes, in fact, more often than not, it can be to his detriment. It's great being all action. It's great, just bang, give us the ball and I'm going to charge forward. I'm going to make a big 25-yard pass. When it happens, it looks amazing. But it has been something he has to work on, really something he needs to work on. He has been getting better at it, but in terms of being consistently good at it, I think that's something that the manager be looking at the back of his mind, particularly Europe, and thinking that might be too much of a risk. I want to have a more sort of get the ball down on the ground, don't do anything that's too risky, but still have class and still have the ability. And certainly in terms of unpicking the lock, McGregor, and again, just on base of what we've seen or what we've heard of him and what he's profiled as, Erne Engels, those are going to be the two guys that could be your locksmiths, while you've got your Bernardo in the background, keeping things very robust, keeping things sensible, great with the ball retention and making sure that you're doing the basics sort of well. In that case, that's just where I think that having a high impact player and a really sort of cagey fixture such as Rio Hatate from the off when you're trying to find your feet, I don't necessarily think that's the best solution to go with. We're going to have hopefully enough threat, as I say, down the wings as well, with the overlaps with the wing backs, and obviously our strikers doing what they do. So I would feel that we've got enough attacking threat from the wings, from the forward, and obviously in the form of the midfielders that would be in situ to get the job done. Whereas I think Hatate would be best suited in certain European games to be coming on as, right, we've managed to settle into this game quite comfortable. Right now, let's add on a little wee bit more threat and get somebody to come in and do something like that. I don't think starting, particularly in these big away games against your Atalantas and your Borussia Dortmunds, the going gung-ho from the start, is going to be the way to tackle it. And I don't think that's something that Brendan Rodgers would be wanting to do. Of course, as I say, it's just opinion. I could be proven completely wrong, and he starts every single game. But this is just the way that I think, looking at the players, as I say, is the fact he's wanted to bring in these two guys, and Bernardo and Engels aren't the same player. So that idea saying, well, you're playing two guys that are the same, they aren't. Engels is going to be more of the creative influence, and that's also going to free up McGregor a wee bit as well. So he's going to be pitching in with the creative influence. Yes, he'll still be orchestrating, but he'll be slightly more advanced if you've got Bernardo in there, because Bernardo would be the default guy that'd be falling back, breaking up the play and passing it on to the guys, whether it's the wingers, whether it's McGregor, whether it's Engels, and making them make it happen. Whereas I say sometimes Rio can sometimes get lost in the shuffle a wee bit because he is so all action, and sometimes he can actually burn out. Now his fitness has got a lot better, and he looks stronger, he looks fitter, but I'm saying, just talking at it and trying to look at it from a European eye, that's the one that I think is going to be the most swapped out. When it comes to domestic stuff, I would expect to see more of Hatate, and particularly, as I say, in games where you're expected to just blow teams away or, be comfortable win, there'd be more in terms of reason to have Hatate on. Now, if we look at just this wee graph here, obviously the yellow's the current season, and the blue is, or the sort of green, is from last season. Now you can see there the key points are his stats in terms of his XG is up, in terms of build up is up, fouls won. This is because he's all impact. He's obviously a guy that's obviously getting fouled quite a lot. Now, in terms as well, an interesting thing about Hatate in this season is he's had the most sort of important or key passes in the league so far. So as I say, you look at those graphs, fantastic from an attacking standpoint. He's managed to sort of reduce the turnovers, but in terms of the sort of pressures and other defensive side of things, it's still he's more of an attacking guy. And yeah, you know what? That's not a bad thing, but talking about that all-round package, I just think when you look at guys like Bernardo and, again, just based on profile, Engels, they offer more rounded. And that's just why I think that potentially Hatate could be the guy who's switched in or out more often, because in terms of, things in his toolkit, he's less rounded than the others. And I think that particularly in European games, you need to do a lot of different things and do them quite well. You don't have to excel at every single one of them, but it certainly helps if you have a more sort of full, toolkit in your arsenal where you can do more things. And as I say, I think that's just for me. Rio Hatate is high risk, high reward. Don't get me wrong, I just want to caveat that. I think he's an absolutely fantastic player, and I am glad that he's a player that we've got. He's a player that I definitely am absolutely thrilled that we managed to keep hold of. And I think that he'll be a key player moving forward. I just think when it comes, as I say, to the rotation, particularly in Europe, Hatate could be the guy that drops out more often than not from the start. But is someone that's going to come on and prove impact. And I think that is going to work into our hands, because that's what we've always been looking for. Yes, you could also argue we'll start them and you can bring these guys to shore up things. But I think that, as I say, he's talking about looking at pragmatism. I think that Brendan Rodgers will want to put in a right good account of ourselves at Europe this time. With the 8 games playing against the 2 pot 4, the 2 pot 3, there's more scope to get more points, do better, collect more points. Obviously, when you've got those sort of 6, 2 home, 2 away in the previous setup, you've just got to do what you've got to do. And I think that that's sort of, even with Ange Postecoglou, that was something that punished us more often than not. It was great. We'd come out the traps, you'd be right up for it and look for it and think, oh, here we go. But there never seemed to be another option, another style of play. And I just think with the options that we now find having in the midfield, that I think that the manager might want to, in some cases, work his way into these games a wee bit more, find his footing, play our own game, and then obviously have the option to bring on quality from the bench to really impact the game or push it over the line, as I say. But playing the games as and when they come along, like look at the first game against Slovan Bratislava, for example, at Celtic Park. That's probably because of timescales. That's probably one that might come too early for Erne Engels, for example. So you're probably going to end up with Rio Hatate in there. But looking at the kind of team that they are, they're there to be got at. So you can understand why you might want to put in Hatate from the start. But again, as I say, then you flip that over and you look at your game away to Dortmund or your game away to Atalanta, where you know exactly what you're going to be playing up against. Midfield is going to be a very heavy section and a bit of the part that really needs to be won. That's the way these European teams play. That's when I think the manager's going to look at and say, right, I want pragmatism here. I want guys who are calm. They're going to get the ball on the foot and do the right things. They're not just going to be high risk, because with that, yes, comes high reward, but also comes high chance of getting punished. So anyway, that is my thought on the Celtic midfield. As I say, it's a great headache to have, is it not? You know, it's been a while since we've been sitting here and saying, well, who do we play? Do we play Rio Hatate with all the energy of the day and the goal threat, or do we play the guy that we spent £11 million on? Or how about that guy that's the under-21s captain of Portugal? I'm pretty sure there'd be a lot of managers out there be absolutely envious to have these at it. As I say, it's just an opinion. That's just mine. What do you think? How do you think the midfield trio is going to pan out for the course of the season? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you think the manager's going to chop and change depending on it? Do you think he's going to go for the European tough games, that more, as I say, European style, where it's all about calmness and composure? Or do you think he's just going to throw caution to the wind and just do what we do? Because that's what Celtic do. It's the Celtic way and never change it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, we love the interaction. We'll always try to get back to them. So anyway, that is us for now. We'll be back with some more videos in due course. We'll be looking at those Champions League games as and when they come up. But until then, thanks again for watching. Take care of yourself. And as always, hail, hail.